So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. We're really excited to hear from Gina from EcoRise. She's got some really exciting stuff to share. Just before we get started, a few things. We are recording, and so this recording will go up on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and I'll email everyone who registered with with all of that information. So if you have to hop off or you have any of your coworkers that you want to see it, please feel free to share that YouTube link. I also want to start with our land acknowledgement. So I am currently working in Austin, and as such, I'm on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tonkawa, Cherokee, and Sauna people. Our ongoing colonial presence on Indigenous lands compels us to take action now to counteract the effects of colonization. The work we do through the Texas Children in Nature Network is one small step towards that effort. I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat about land acknowledgements. Please feel free to check those out. Since we are recording today, I just ask if you could keep yourselves on mute and your camera off. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to share the findings of the GenThrive project and also share what we're going to be up to in the year 2021 and 22, looking ahead. I'm wondering if anyone would be willing to share in the chat box just a few of the things that you're looking to learn about, what intrigued you to join this particular session. I'd love to make sure that I can address any questions that you have or really take time to talk about things that are important to you. So if you don't mind, I've seen people's names and where they're coming from all across Texas. And I'm excited to see a lot of folks that have participated in GenThrive in 2020. But if anybody has specific things and reasons that they joined, that would be it would be wonderful for me to learn a little bit about that as I go ahead and set up a presentation. So I'm going to share some of the results of GenThrive and sort of the goals of the project. And I'll do a little bit of demo of the tech tools that you'll be able to use yourself and share with anybody that you want. And then there'll be plenty of time for Q&A, and we can go ahead and have a dialogue about where we take the project from here. So I'm going to screen share one moment. All right. So I'm Gina LaMotte, and I'm the founder, president, and chief innovation officer of EcoRise. I founded the organization in 2008, and we offer a K12 program that is serving schools with curriculum, professional development for teachers and administrators, the Student Innovation Fund, which are classroom grants, all for the purpose of getting students environmentally aware and literate, but also taking action to address climate change and environmental sustainability in their communities. It's been an exciting journey over the years, and as we've grown, especially across the country, we've seen a lot of schools and a lot of communities that share some of the same challenges around understanding what are all of the different resources that we have that we can engage with our youth, whether it's on campus or off campus, and how can we as organizations that have all these various programs better understand how we can collaborate with one another, how we can essentially, lean on one another and leverage each other's resources, because a lot of us do very complementary work, and most all of it is towards the same sort of North Star of preparing young people to be environmental leaders and stewards for the future. So that was sort of the genesis of why we started this project, GenThrive. And GenThrive has been really at the core asking the question, what would it take to ensure that every child in Texas is environmentally literate and empowered to build healthy, just, and sustainable communities? What are the puzzle pieces that we're missing to ensure this, right? And one of the key things that we had identified as just sort of an absolutely fundamental piece of this challenge is knowing, having an understanding of the landscape analysis, like how many people are doing what types of programs, which schools are engaged, and better understanding the network that we have that we can tap into. So the three main goals of Gen Thrive are to first understand the state of K-12 environmental education. Once we understand the different resources and organizations and programs, how can we find ways to build alliances and work together to scale our impact? And then how can we use all this information to create data visualization tools that can help us better illustrate the need as well as increase support? Financial support, public awareness, school interest. When we initially started this, the first stakeholder, if you will, that we had in mind was the environmental education service providers themselves, which are a lot of us on the phone. It certainly is what EcoRise is. And saying, for ourselves and our colleagues, how can we use data with a very strong equity lens to be able to increase our impact, reach more students? But we also had looked at how we could serve foundations this information to be able to offer stronger giving strategies. How could we use this information to support districts who are searching for these types of programs? For the community at large with cities and parents and such, how can this data and information be available to anybody who's interested? When we asked folks to participate in this survey, first in 2019 and then in 2020 again, we really cast the net wide. It was about, who's the extended family of folks working in environmental education, whether you are part of the Children in Nature movement and focused on outdoor learning, or whether you are looking at green buildings and green school facilities, whether you're looking from an environmental justice and social justice lens, or looking at health and wellness as it relates to school and the environment. We were interested in kind of a come one, come all approach so that we could really kind of patch together and remediate the silos of work that's being done, because we tend to go to different conferences, we tend to belong to different associations, and sometimes it's hard for those to overlap and to kind of see the bigger picture. So we did outreach to several hundred organizations throughout the state, that kind of some having a stronger focus in certain areas than others. So last year, we had a statewide outreach effort, which was leveraging a lot of state partners like the TCINN. We also looked at who were the regional players, right? So we have certain leadership from Houston, from El Paso, from Dallas, Fort Worth, that were running their own either networks or were closely plugged into a lot of the players on the ground that we didn't have visibility to. So through this sort of both regional approach and state approach, we canvassed hundreds of different organizations and ended up collecting data on organizations from all across, not just Texas, but also those that are national that serve Texas schools and youth, I should say. We had 277 organizations and almost 400 unique programs that were serving students across our state. So with all this information, we ended up analyzing it and cleaning it up and then throwing it onto a website that's available to everybody. This is a site here. I think Sarah may be able to throw this link in the chat box. But this is essentially what you look at as you scroll down, and I'll demo this in a second. But when you see these four little boxes, each one of them has a tutorial, so you can literally get a walkthrough on how to use the tools. And then these four bars underneath are collapsible windows that each show you a different tool. And I'll walk through just a couple of those right now. The first one is a GIS map using Esri, Arcgis, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And this particular tool, I kind of see as, how do our programs interact and relate to external factors, right? How does this relate to issues of social vulnerability, rates of poverty, health indicators, a lot of demographic information? How do our programs relate to climate risk and environmental pollutants? How do our programs relate to the schools themselves? Are programs always in urban areas? Are there ones that are available in rural communities? And in this way, you know, as a lot of you are probably familiar with these types of maps, you can toggle on different data layers and really start to understand, you know, where might there be a large need for these programs, where are there gaps of these programs, and how can we ensure that all communities have access to these types of resources. This is a close-up example of what it may look like if you were to zoom into East Austin, and all the little gray dots are every school. The pink and yellow around it indicates how many environmental education programs are active on those campuses. And then this sort of color blocking of, you know, kind of a peach beigey, I guess more of a beige tan color through the greens and into the darker tones indicates the level of median household income. So you could see just from a rate of income level where the programs are active and where they're not. This is a different lens using climate risk and environmental pollutants. So here in the Houston region, there are indicators, the red lines are polluted waterways, and the brown dots are the hazardous waste sites. So you can see, you know, if you are a teacher and engaging with youth on this project, you could utilize this map and say, you know, let's focus our environmental education projects this semester or this school year on the issues that are in our own backyard or relevant to our particular region, right? So there's a real opportunity for place-based learning here. And then this one is specifically looking at climate risks. So here we have some data layers that are activated around coastal flooding based on hurricane levels and historic tornado and hurricane tracks. And as you turn on some of the other indicators, there's also like drought and wildfire hazard and air quality and all sorts of other things. So that's one tool, the map. The second tool is the Field Trends and Resource Directory. Now, this one is an interactive dashboard, which I'm really excited about. We created it in partnership with UT and their Texas Advanced Computing Center. It's been part of a partnership with the Planet Texas 2050 initiative at the University of Texas. And so this is something that anyone can work with and utilize, and I'll actually demonstrate how to use it in a second. But what's wonderful about this is it's really helping us as a movement better understand our own movement, right? So it's very internal focused, whereas the map is, I kind of perceive as external focused. How do we relate to the world and all these other indicators of health and equity and such? This is more, how do we have trends and patterns within our own work that we can learn from, that we can maybe find ways to collaborate and things like that. Here's just a quick picture of what it looks like to look at some of the actual records that you can export. And I will again demonstrate that in a minute. So some of the results, drum roll. As I mentioned, we had 277 organizations participate in this survey. We believe that that was about probably 75% of organizations that would make sense to be part of this. We had, of those, of course, many have multiple programs and offerings. So out of the 277 organizations, there was 395 unique programs. And as you can see, we asked about the sector that they're coming from. So over 50% of folks participating in this were representing nonprofits, 29% were representing government, and then we had others that were representing higher ed and a little bit of for-profit. We asked questions around what environmental themes were taught. And so this was a programmatic question. And you can see out of the almost 400 programs, 286 of them were focused on conservation, right behind the outdoor learning. Over half of them were focused on STEM education and water. And then you could see sort of the trends going down for like less, we're focused, 25% were focused on food and nutrition, on waste, and it kind of goes down to workforce development, air quality, et cetera. We also asked what the kind of regional scope of services was. So, are you an organization that offers services that are strictly focused at the local level, which was 32%, or do you serve a region or multi-county, which is 38%? Can you serve the whole state? Are you serving the whole country, or are your services available internationally? So that gave us a sense, like, what is the capacity for organizations to serve more geographic reach. With audiences served, we see that elementary, middle, and high are all pretty high, but elementary has the most programs. About 3 out of 4 are serving elementary. And then you can see less of the organizations are focused on either teacher and administrator services or the community at large, which is sort of a lot of parks would fall into that, places that have family programs. So there's just some interesting analysis, and you could take what you want out of it. We asked about program offerings. So out of all the things that you offer, what, tell us more about them. So again, 3 out of 4 were offering direct teaching. So they were the ones facilitating experiences with youth. About half of them were offering field trips. A little less than half were offering instructional materials and curriculum. And, teacher training, classroom presentations, that kind of goes down. You'll see at the kind of lowest level, not too many were offering internships, not too many were offering grant funding for classrooms. We also were asking about what percentage of youth were coming from Title I schools. And what's interesting is that most people don't track. So that was its own sort of insight, right? We learned that 47% of program providers do not track where their students are coming from. Take that for what it is, but if you're looking at sort of equity and access and ensuring that resources are available to students coming from all different backgrounds, this is something that would be an interesting indicator and help us as a movement make sure that we are being as inclusive and accessible as possible. When programming occurs. So it was asking literally, when do you have your offerings? Some of them were everything, like it's, virtual experience and you could do it anytime, but a lot of them, 3 out of 4 again, were during the school day. So this is something that would be probably a field trip or something that comes into the classroom. A good 170 roughly were summer programs. And then there was a good portion that were after school and or weekends. So there's a bunch more graphs and charts, and I can show you how we're going to use those. But that's sort of some cliff notes as to the findings from last year. In short, we have a lot of offerings to bring to the table. When you just look at rural communities, who many of them don't have any organizations that are based in that region, they still have 80 plus programs that are technically available to those communities. So that's one way to think about these types of offerings is, how can we find ways to really connect schools and youth to programs that are available, but might not be, obvious, frankly, or well advertised. From a kind of subject matter perspective, we have really strong coverage of folks teaching about conservation, outdoor learning, STEM, and water education. A fairly well-balanced mix of grade levels, although it did kind of trickle down as we got to the higher grade levels. And then a lot of offerings that provide direct teaching, field trips, instructional materials, and teacher trainings. On the flip side, some of the gaps that we saw were the sort of lack of focus on tracking services to Title I schools, and then less content focused on energy education, workforce development, air quality, green building, and transportation. So as we look at the year ahead, one of the things that we're currently working on is creating activities for the classroom so that students and teachers can actually engage in the GIS map that I showed you. So this will be ways for students to not only use it as a research tool, to explore, what sort of issues are in my local area. But there's also going to be an opportunity for us to build out sort of citizen science or community science activities where students would actually be capturing their own data and being able to upload that. So they could be doing their own, air quality audits and monitoring or tree counts or things like that. We are also received some grant funding to continue supporting regional collaborations. So we have regions throughout the state, as I mentioned, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, DFW, et cetera. And we have a small amount of funding that we can offer to really support local communities in being able to use this information to, share resources with local schools, really do whatever the heck they want to do with it. But ways to make this information applicable, right? Like, how do you take it into action? How can we have this support new collaborations, new partnerships, and expanded reach? We will also be enriching the data and maps by, first of all, doing a school district and campus level data collection. Oops, one of the bullets didn't work out here. So we're going to be plotting which campuses have different programs active. We are also going to be looking at green career connections and industry trends so that we can connect the environmental education programs and the schools to different workforce development programs and opportunities. We are working with the University of Texas for future forecasting analysis. So we could, for example, work with Austin ISD or whoever and say, here is what the climate trends tell us, and how might we proactively seek environmental education programs that can help students be prepared for the future and educate them on issues that are very relevant to their regions. And also, how can we create an alignment to local climate action plans? And this is something we've started with the city of San Antonio, but we're very interested in finding out ways in which this activation of youth and the mapping and climate resilience and risk and all that kind of thing, how can we have students be supporting and well aligned to the city's goals and potentially adding their data sets to our map as well. And then last but not least, we will be doing another round of data collection in fall 2021. And this is intended to not only allow new folks to come in who weren't able to participate in the first round, or folks to offer more information than they did the first time around, but also to ask some new questions. So we have a stronger emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion with this next round of questions. And a few other factors, but it'll be a little bit more robust, and that will allow us to be able to, even gain more insights from this type of activity. So once again, this is the website that I believe should probably be in the chat box. And then I'm going to stop for a second. We can take some questions, but then what I'd like to do is be able to share the website itself and kind of walk through very quickly how to use that dashboard, because it's something that anybody can use. It's really useful information. You can export the information for your purposes. So I just want to make sure you feel comfortable with that. And of course, we can open it up to more Q&A after that.
So Gina, we have one question in the chat, which is, did you track if the different sites provided transportation or stipends for transportation when you were looking at some of those equity aspects?
We did not, but that's a great point. And one of the things that is on our next survey is to ask what specific initiatives people have that fall into the definition of supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so there'd be an opportunity for someone to put something like that there, but I think maybe we could just actually add it ourselves as an option.
And then we have another question. Do you feel that the advent of COVID affected your data collection in terms of programs offered or communities served?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great question. So one thing, quite frankly, is that people were just exhausted, busy, and had other priorities. So I think the outreach work in a lot of ways was more laborious than it would be in a normal year. We also had a lot of caveats with the information that was collected. So people wanted to know, how can I ensure that I can clearly explain that this is something we have, but it's on pause, but it's going to come back, or that we're currently transferring all of our things from in-person to virtual. And so we did collect information from folks to say, how have you modified your program for COVID? Because there were schools that were actively looking for resources, and we wanted to make sure that they could find them. That will be a question we will probably remove this coming fall, hopefully, fingers crossed. And And then lastly, I would say, I think it affected our data collection because some people were furloughed or, laid off. And so there was certainly a huge level of empathy and understanding and patience around all of that. But with all that said, I think getting 277 organizations to fill out a survey on 400 unique programs is still a pretty hearty amount of information for us to see some really meaningful trends.
Don't think we have any more in the chat, but I'll keep an eye on it. So if you want to start sharing your screen again,
Sure.
I think we're good.
Thank you. All right. Okay, y'all. So this is the link that you may have already jumped over to. And this site basically goes over some of the stuff I just talked about, sort of the overview of how this is useful for different types of users and what you can do with it. And these are the 4 different resources that have their own little video tutorial with yours truly. But what I want to show you are the 2 that I think are the most valuable, easy to use, and relevant to the Texas community. So the first is the Climate Equity and Education Map. This is a GIS map. If it's ever being sticky, which GIS maps can be because they're hosting all sorts of external data, you can always click directly on the link and go straight over to the map itself, which I'm going to do right now, just so we have a little more space. So this right now is only highlighting Texas data, but for your information, we have also done the same exercise with Louisiana, and we're currently doing this same survey exercise, and we'll replicate it with 8 different states in the Southeast, and then conversations with a few other states as well. So this is a Texas only map, but it may soon be a bit broader. And what you see here are the kind of shades of teal indicate the density of environmental education programs. So you can see automatically that Houston, Austin, and San Antonio are the Education Service Center regions that have the most access and concentration of environmental education resources. And then you can see those that have less, right? The red dots are the headquarters for our organization. And of course, if you clicked on them, you'd see what this information is. I'm not going to bother with that right now, but what I want you to just note is that over here on the left-hand side are all the layers that you can click on and off. So education, all the education data sets are under the little schoolhouse. You can see every LEED certified school building in green. You can see all of the K12 schools as gray dots. There's 10,000 of them. You can look at, we have program and environmental education program sites from last school year, but not this school year. So because of COVID, so we'll be doing that information collection in the fall. And then we have also beyond sort of this density of environmental ed programs, we also have density of workforce development related programs. I will also say that if you go over to the planet here with the leaf, you can then look at other things like drought intensity. I'm actually going to turn some of these off because they get crazy. Just a tip when you're using ArcGIS, if you have too many data layers on, it looks insane. So don't go too heavy and too many at the same time. But you can look at a lot of different data sets that have to do with climate risk, with hazardous waste sites, with landfills, brownfields, air quality conditions, impaired waterways, a lot of energy information around power plants, wind industry, coal mines, community gardens that layer is only for Austin, but we're hoping to get more of those loaded up. And then we have this little 3 people community layer. So this one is population, median household income, diversity, asthma rates, obesity, diabetes, voting patterns, infrastructure layers. You'll notice we have a number of San Antonio specific things because we're working with the city of San Antonio to load various climate and environmental data sets, but we hope to work with other municipalities to be able to add specific local data sets as well. And then the neat thing is there's this little piece of paper looking thing with a star or a plus sign rather. And here you can type in whatever you want. So say, well, GenThrive doesn't have something that I'm interested in. I want to look specifically at food deserts. And you can then just search the entire database of ArcGIS, and you could add, I won't click the add button, but you can add these layers, the USA supermarket access, food access by census tract. You'll have to go through the work of choosing which data sets you want, and you can see the details to see where they're sourced from, to see if it's a source that you feel comfortable using. But that is the way that the GIS map is working right now. Of course, if you zoom in, you can really click on regions and start to see things more specifically, like I showed you in the PowerPoint before. And if you were to click on something, it'll give you a data set that you can read about who had filled this particular thing out, or what that environmental point is, or what have you. So that is the map, and that will continue to be built out over the year. So I'm going to collapse that here. And then you could also go to Field Trends and Resource Directory. This is the one we built with UT. And this, if you click on it, will take you to its own separate tab. And this part is, I find, very exciting. So this is where I pulled all those graphs from that you saw in the PowerPoint. And what is cool about this is that not only can you export all of these different graphs and images with this, you can see this tiny little camera button, but you could also toggle to organizational records and export this list, which is 56 pages long, or program records and export this list. So it's all information you can just like grab and go. But what's neat about it is that right now we show all of Texas, right? But you can go to region and say that you just want to see every organization that is based in Austin, Central Texas. It'll change all of your charts for you. It'll change all of your organizational records and your program records. We'll then say, well, I want to see organization, okay, not necessarily based in Austin. I want to see organizations that have programs that are available to Region 13 Austin students. So that gives us 76 organizations offering 172 programs. And then maybe you say, well, I am only actually looking for groups served. I'm only looking for elementary age. And I specifically want somebody with instructional materials, or i.e. curriculum. And I'd love something that is focused on just outdoor learning. So that brings us to 26 organizations and 46 records. And you can go through this and see, the name of the program, the organization, the description. This is all the stuff that people filled out. What environmental theme this is serving, the group served, which education service centers this is available in, if it's on campus, off campus, or virtual, the time of day that it's happening, whether it's standards aligned, if so, to which standards, what type of evaluation they do on this program, how many students they've served, whether it's focused on Title I, whether it's available to rural communities, the COVID-19 adaptations. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's a lot of information. And then you can export that and take it where you like. You could also just see, okay, when I'm only looking at Austin elementary programs offering outdoor learning curriculum, I want to see, how many of these, what sectors they're coming from. And so you can change your little pie charts and bar graphs. Maybe we don't want to be so specific. Maybe we just want to look at Austin trends. So Austin, again, has 172 programs available to it. And you can toggle all of these different things, the program times, the regions served. You're just looking at the trends among all of these different organizations and their programs. So that is something that I find really exciting. We're doing some tweaking on this still. It's not perfect. I want to change some of these titles to make them a little more obvious when you read it, and in sync with some of the ways that people just answer the questions. But it's a great starting point as a dashboard that can be shared and utilized to connect schools or parents or whoever to these different programs, and also connect us to one another, right? Like how can I find at EcoRise, if we're expanding in El Paso, how can I look up other programs there that may be useful to collaborate with? So that's the Field Trends and Resource Directory. As just an FYI, the program provider network map is something called Kumu, which is a network map that is more relational. And I won't go into it right now, but you can again toggle and search different settings and like rearrange folks based on what region they're coming from or what ages they serve. And then you can also do a K12 climate policy map if you're interested in looking at national policies for climate adaptation in school districts across the country. So that is looking at things at a bit more of a national level. So I will leave it at that. And I'm going to stop sharing again and just take questions and hear some feedback and ideas.
We don't currently have any questions in the chat, but if anyone would like to put some questions in, please feel free. But I kind of have a question for you, just to kind of get us started, Gina. What is kind of your goal to share with this next round? Like you already talked, you're going to look at a little bit more at DEI indicators, but what are some things that you guys are really hoping to get out of this next round of questions?
Yeah. A few different things. So a lot of people filled out the survey and just offered their program information and didn't offer they just offered their organizational information. So like address, website, mission statement, sector, that type of thing. And they didn't fill out the program information, which would allow us to really help build out those trends and connect educators and families to these resources. So that's one piece, is just getting additional program information from people. Another one, as I mentioned, is the diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have specific questions looking at which organizations are led by people of color. We also have asked specifically if you've made any if you have any initiatives or if you're taking any steps towards having a more diverse program, whether that's in the content itself or the audience that you're serving. There's a number of other pieces that are a little bit more nuanced. Like this time we are also, and this is part of our learning from last year, but we're going to be asking questions that include pre-K and have a little bit more space for people to explain how families and higher ed, like people outside of the range of kindergarten through 12th grade, how they are being impacted and can take advantage of these types of programs as well. Those are a few of the things, but there's a number of other pieces. I don't have all the differences fresh in mind, but we think it will be pretty useful for folks.
Great. Was there anything that you all learned through the last few years you've been doing this that kind of surprised you, that you were like, oh, that's really good information that we had no idea, and it's just kind of coming to light through this data collection?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that there's a lot of resources that we all have to bring to the table that a lot of schools may not necessarily know exist, right? So the fact that, and maybe some of this is because of COVID and so many programs and offerings have gone virtual, have been forced to go virtual. It now actually opens up tons of opportunities for rural communities. So I'm very excited to figure out how we can really be of support when it comes to essentially marketing and outreach. Like we all do our own independent, work and efforts to make sure that, people know that we have this curriculum or this upcoming training or this field trip opportunity. But if there's a kind of a directory of sorts that people can go search and they can find it themselves, and we've already helped get these great resources in front of schools and teachers and parents, that's one thing that I think, there's a lot of opportunity for growth, so that all communities know that these are resources that they could take advantage of.
Yeah, we've got another question in the chat, which is, how do you go about adding the program information if your organization initially only supplied the basics organizational information?
I could send a link for collecting the program information. You could just do it that way. They could reach out to me. Let me put my email in the chat box.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that I also add, Gina, I'll add your email into the follow-up email that I send out tomorrow as well.
Okay, great.
A question is, how have you found that schools or teachers are using the Gen Thrive data or the regional service centers?
To be quite honest, they haven't yet, because this is something we just finished in December. And the first sort of audience that we've been sharing it with has been the various service providers that had participated. We've also shared it with funders who've been really curious about how they can use this to learn what's going on where. And government entities have been interested. So like municipalities, the offices of sustainability have been interested. The EPA has been interested. So our hope is that, and we're being, again, very patient and understanding with the situation that schools are in right now. We have not wanted to kind of push this on them right away. With that said, we at EcoRise happen to have several thousand teachers that we work with in Texas. And so we've been sharing this resource with our teachers, but we haven't done a concerted effort to engage them in it. That'll really be a push for this coming fall as we launch a new school year with everybody and make sure that, all the service providers and other people in sort of our ecosystem can take advantage of it and utilize the tool.
With that, is there a way that our partners through Texas Children in Nature can really help kind of get the word out and then also help you kind of gather data? Is there a way that we as TCIN can help that effort?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when we do the outreach again, ensuring that we have the TCIN members as part of the data collection so the good work is represented is really important. I also think that there's an opportunity for just playing with it, right? Like, a workshop, like, let's see how this might help inform where we have the most, activity and engagement with TCIN members. Like maybe there's certain regions that you could analyze and see, especially with, again, the equity lens or the health lens, how this might be supportive. I would also just mention that, like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I see, as somebody who has to fundraise on behalf of my nonprofit, all these years, and I'm sure many of you do as well, you could use this to create a need statement and be able to say the reason we want to reach these certain students or this certain region of the of the city or whatever it is because we don't see a lot of services offered there. And look at the health indicators, look at the median household income, look at the climate risks in this neighborhood. I really see it as an opportunity for folks to make a data-driven case for fundraising and grant writing, which I just hope is just a public tool that people can take advantage of, right? So, so that's sort of some of the different ways in which we're looking at utilizing this. The last piece I'll just mention is that, we're partnered with the University of Texas and Plan Texas 2050. And we will be working with them for over 6 years on a Greening Texas project initiative that they have. And it will end up actually bringing qualitative data points to the map. So rather than just looking at this sort of static data, where's their landfill, what is the median household income, we will also be adding stories of teachers, of students, of districts, of community members around their relationship to climate resilience and health. And so that's something that the University of Texas will be engaging a lot of communities in, and we would love TCIN to be part of that if there's interest and it makes sense.
Great. I don't have any more specific questions in the chat, but I'd like to throw a question out to all of our participants and kind of how you all think you might use some of this data that Gina shared. I think that might help everyone kind of start thinking about how they might be able to highlight some of this information. Helen put, look for partners to leverage resources. I think that's a great use of it.
I'd also love to hear if there's other things that would make it more useful. Like, is there something that would ensure that this, helps answer any questions you might have, or data sets that you've been trying to access, or whatever that might be. We're always sort of in this listening session, if you will, to hear like how we continue to make this useful for folks.
So Caroline put the Region 4 ecosystem is planning a teacher PD this summer, and this would be really great to share with their teachers there. Kara put connecting with schools and partners in grant writing. Sandra has, I think this would be very valuable for focusing programming. And then Erin has a great springboard for collaboration. Need more direction and help connecting the dots with local schools. Amy has the transportation to programming. This seems to be a common challenge for our groups. That might help.
Trying to think of how we could do that. The transportation to programming. So would it essentially just be asking programs that have field trips, for example, whether or not they offer transportation, or is there a way to maybe indicate the need to find transportation, to find funders to support transportation, and be able to, or maybe even something with like the bus system, you know, like here in Austin's Cap Metro, but I just wonder like how we could get at that and support that, you know?
Yeah, Amy put yes to both of these.
Okay.
Sandra has also great for finding schools that need programming. So yeah, right now you don't have the schools answering the questions so much, but is there a way to find out from teachers beyond them, you know, looking through the map to see what programming is available, but a way for them to indicate that they are looking for something?
No, that's not there right now. We're hoping we were going to do this past year. I should have mentioned this as one of the sort of the COVID hiccups, but we're hoping to have mapped to ask the service providers which schools are engaged in your programs. But because there was such, you know, the world has been upside down in school districts, we didn't ask that question. And so this coming fall, we are hoping to map which schools have active programs. There's a little bit, it's some of the challenges, frankly, in this type of work is like every organization approaches this a little bit differently. And especially for those that are off-site, you know, nature centers and parks and a lot of outdoor learning does not, or even aquariums and things like that, they don't happen on campus and they don't necessarily track which schools the students are coming from. They might be tracking other things, right? Like just, I don't know, number of teachers in schools from a whole district rather than the campus itself. Could be a mashup of a bunch of schools in one trip. So sometimes it's a little difficult to parse that out. But one of the things that we really are trying to use as a connecting point and sort of a common thread in the way we frame this is how are these programs related to schools? While we know that many of them are informal after school summer programs, but they're working with the same kids, right? So that'll be something we hope as we move forward we can do is be able to at least see from the schools what's active there, and then we could all work with our schools who have those school relationships to say, hey, you can use this tool to find additional partners if you need to fill in the gaps where you're missing programs.
Yeah, I think also, I don't know if this would be possible, but you were talking about kind of the regional approach, and that's really how TCIN is formatted, and maybe it's putting the contact information for our regional leaders. Like if you can't find something that you're looking for in your region, contact this person and they might be able to put you to the right person.
Yeah.
And then Caroline asks, is there a question about program costs or fees to school, or noting that a program is free?
There hasn't been in this last round, but I believe there will be in this coming round. That's been brought up a couple times and I keep forgetting it. So thank you for bringing it up. I'm writing it down again. It is something that would be important for schools to know for sure.
And then we've got a comment from Sandra that says it would be helpful to find funding for transportation, going back to that transportation point. I know even just this morning, I got an email from a partner saying, we've got a school that's interested, but we don't have a way to get them there. Do you have any ideas? So that kind of thing happens a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now put great for finding different locations to take students for programming across Texas. I have lots of students and need places to take them. Also for finding local people who can be guest speakers for our students.
Yes. Yeah, one of the things that it's an aspiration, it's not on the table yet, but we're looking to potentially build out a network of green professionals that could be speakers for students, for classrooms, or whatever context you want to call it. But essentially, how do you have sort of that ecosystem of adults that may be presenters or be able to provide a field trip or, whatever that is, virtual or in person, and have them sort of as a ready volunteer group that can really enhance some of our programs and enhance the classroom experience for youth. So it's something we've been talking with the U.S. Green Building Council about doing specifically for green building and green schools, but it could expand beyond to additional expertise as well. One thing I'll just mention about the funding piece is that we, as I briefly mentioned before, we have funders that are excited about this because, I mean, not we have funders, but we have been essentially consulting with foundations to say, number one, can you, would you help make sure that, your grantees are part of this, because we want to make sure their good work is represented. And number two, like, how would this be useful for you? And essentially kind of trying to like connect the dots between the services that are happening, all of us offering all of these things, right? These schools and youth that need it and need access to it, and the funders that can make that happen. So the intent is that, one, this can be something that helps them see the need and helps them see the good work that's being done, and also differentiate our work so that we're not just sort of all clumped into environmental education or outdoor learning without really understanding the nuances and differences of our work. But also our hope, and this is something we've been working with some funders in exploring, is potentially mapping the funders on here too, so that all of us could find what funders are interested in the type of work that we do, and how can we kind of, get down to business and understand, like, they only care about STEM focused work, or they only care about outdoor learning, and really facilitate like systems change and bringing really making the pie bigger for the amount of resources that can certainly be put towards transportation or many other things, to be able to scale this work and accelerate our impact in the community.
Yeah, I think that piece is really great. I think that's a great tool that this could be used for. I know as another nonprofit organization that we're always looking for those funders, and being able to map that out, I think would be really helpful.
I will say, Sarah, that one thing we added, another friend of mine, this upcoming year, is we added a question for people to say which networks or associations they're part of. And I thought this might be useful and fascinating to see, like, those that are, associated with children in nature, and see how that relates to, the STEM educator groups and the TAEE, TAAEEAA, whatever. There's the TEA's version, and then there's the TAEE version, but the environmental education group, ANCA, like, there's just so many different ones, and really be able to, expand the support and capacity and knowledge base of the associations themselves. So.
So the next question that just came in is actually for me. Is how long do the recordings available? They are available on our YouTube channel, like, indefinitely. So you're always available to watch them via YouTube. And because they're on YouTube, I think if you are a paid YouTube subscriber, you can download, but it depends on your YouTube subscription. But I don't have any other questions for Gina. This is your chance to get them in before we finish. Just as kind of a couple things as we finish up, our webinar next month will be on May 5th, and it is on nature and with early learners. And so I will put the link to that in the chat, so feel free to register for that. Also, I'll share the link to the recording in the email that goes out tomorrow to everyone who registered. But of course, you can always watch all of them on our YouTube channel. And then they're also linked on our website as well. So thank you. So, oh, also tomorrow I'll send out an evaluation. So please fill that out. So it helps us determine what we're going to be doing as we schedule our next ones out. And so thank you so much.